Bismillah ar-Rahman ar-Rahim. Brothers and sisters, Assalamu Alaikum or Salamun Alaikum. As long as we convey the greeting of peace, this is what truly matters from a Quranic perspective. I say this because several weeks ago I did post a video titled The True Quranic Greeting, where I addressed this controversy that there are some brothers and sisters who believe God has limited and confined the greeting to just Salamun Alaikum. We should not say it any other way. And in that video, I demonstrated that when we examine the concept of greetings in the Quran, we will see that God did not limit nor confine the greeting as claimed, but instead God gave us a general guideline that as long as we convey the greeting of peace, this is what truly matters from a Quranic perspective. So now some people have responded to that video, and today I would like to address some of the things that they have mentioned. So if you are interested in this topic, of course, stick around, but make sure that you have watched this first video, the True Quranic Greeting, and basically, let's begin. So let's begin by reiterating some of the things that were already said in that initial video of mine. The Arabic word for greeting is tahiyya, and its various forms. It is not to be confused with the Arabic word qawl. Okay, as some have said, qawl is actually means to say. It's broad, it's general. But the Arabic word specifically for greetings is tahiyya in its various forms. So let's address all the verses that talk about the tahiyyat in the Quran, which are actually just a handful of them. Let's start with the verses that issue commands as far as greetings. Surah 4 verse 86 is one of them. It says, وَإِذَا حُيِّيتُم بِتَحِيَّةٍ فَحَيُّوا بِأَحْسَنَ مِنْهَا أَوْ رُدُّوهَا. When you are greeted with a greeting, respond with a better greeting or return it. Here we need to note that God issues a command as far as greetings are concerned. He says, when you are greeted with a greeting, فَحَيُّوا, you shall greet. Okay? You shall greet. Here it's translated as respond. Okay? But no, in the Arabic it says, فَحَيُّوا, you shall greet with a better greeting or return it. So the fact that God does give us the option to respond with a better greeting or return the same greeting indicates that God is not limiting nor confining the greeting as is claimed. To me, this is crystal clear, brothers and sisters. We should not try to complicate the deen and say, no, this is not enough. No, this is crystal clear, and we just simply take it for what it is. We should not try to complicate the deen. Another important verse to understand is Surah 24 verse 61, where God also provides for us a command and a general guidelines as far as greetings are concerned. This verse reads, فَإِذَا دَخَلْتُمْ بُيُوتًا فَسَلِّمُوا عَلَىٰ أَنفُسِكُمْ تَحِيَّةً مِّنْ عِنْدِ اللَّهِ مُبَارَكَةً طَيِّبَةً. Translation: when you enter any home, greet one another with a greeting from God, blessed and good. Now, the claim that is being made here is that this phrase in this verse is vague. It does not provide for us the actual greeting from God, because the translation reads, greet one another with a greeting from God. And they said that this verse does not provide for us the actual greeting, therefore we need to go elsewhere in the Quran to find the greeting from God. So they cross-reference this verse with Surah 36 verse 58, which reads, Salamun qawlan min Rabbin Rahim, peace, a saying from a most merciful Lord. So from this they concluded that God's greeting is Salamun, therefore God has limited and confined the greeting to just that. So as you can see, there are several problems with this claim. Let's break this down. Let's go back to Surah 24 verse 61. Now, the translation, at least this one, is not entirely accurate, does not truly reflect what the actual Arabic is saying. So let's look at the Arabic text. It says, فَإِذَا دَخَلْتُمْ بُيُوتًا, when you enter any home, فَسَلِّمُوا, This is such an important Arabic keyword that we must understand. Sallimu comes from the word salam, which means peaceful surrender. And this form of the word sallimu means you shall, it's a command, you shall initiate, activate peaceful surrender. So God here is issuing a command. And this command is a general guideline. When you enter any home, you shall initiate, activate peaceful surrender. And note here, God, again, does not provide for us a word or a phrase to say, a specific word or a phrase to say, but instead, he just says, Sallimu. Make sure you are initiating, activating peaceful surrender. This means, really, you can be as cute as you want to, because, again, God is just giving us a general guideline. This is what really matters. So when you enter any home, you shall initiate, activate peaceful surrender. Then the verse says, onto yourselves a greeting from, at, God, blessed, good. And note here, it says a greeting from God. A greeting from God. In the English translation, it says with a greeting from God, which does make it sound vague. But here it says a greeting. So it's through this Sallimu is a greeting from God that is blessed and good. The verse does not say bi tahiyyatin, with a greeting. It says a greeting, tahiyyatan. So as we can see, it is all here, brothers and sisters. God simply wants us to initiate, activate peaceful surrender when we enter homes as a greeting. This is what really matters. No specific word or phrase is needed that is required, but instead make sure that you're following this general guideline. This is what really matters. Now, hopefully this is clear. Now, let's go to Surah 36, verse 58. What is wrong with the claim that God here is greeting the dwellers of paradise? The problem is that God here is not using the term tahiyya. He's not using the term greeting, tahiyya. He's using the term qawl. Okay, so qawl, sure, qawl can encompass the idea of a greeting. But again, since we are precise and we're studying the actual term in question, which is greetings, tahiyya, obviously, God here is not greeting the dwellers of paradise, saying hello to them. God is literally telling them, Salamun. They are in a peaceful state. The dwellers of paradise are in a peaceful state. It's really as simple as that. And it's important that we don't try to extrapolate things that are not there. But let's assume that God is greeting the dwellers of paradise. Now the question is, where in this verse does God issue a command that we are required to say Salamun only? It does not exist. Okay, it does not exist. So again, even if we went by this argument, there's nothing here that tells us that we are required to say Salamun only. So as we can see, brothers and sisters, it's important to understand that as far as greetings are concerned, God is giving us the commands. Surah 4 verse 86 tells us to we shall greet with a better greeting or respond with a similar greeting. And in 24:61, he says, Sallimu. Initiate, activate, peaceful surrender. This is what really matters. Let me give you another example of this term, Sallimu, found in the same surah. Verse 27. O you who believe, do not enter homes other than your own until you have asked permission, and to sallimu, onto their occupants. To sallimu, that you have initiated, activated, peaceful surrender onto their occupants. Again, there's no command here of a specific word or a phrase. So to me, again, it's what, like I said before, you're splitting hairs. You're making things complicated when they should not be. God is very clear, and we should not try to complicate the deen by demanding more information, just like those who are arguing with Prophet Musa about the heifer. So hopefully this is clear, brothers and sisters. Another verse that talks about the tahiyyat is Surah 58, verse 8, which reads, وَإِذَا جَاءُوكَ حَيُّوكَ بِمَا لَمْ يُحَيِّكَ بِهِ اللَّهُ وَيَقُولُونَ فِي أَنفُسِهِمْ لَوْلَا يُعَذِّبُنَا اللَّهُ بِمَا نَقُولُ. Translation: And when they come to you, Muhammad, they greet you with a greeting that God never greeted you with, and they say within themselves, why does God not punish us for what we say? Now, I do find it interesting they quoted this verse because one question does come to mind here. Are they thinking that because these people, based off of this verse, these people who went up to the messenger of God, these people, by the way, are those who conspired to commit sin and aggression and defiance of the messenger. They conspired against him. They went up to the Prophet Muhammad, and because they said, Assalamu Alaikum and not Salamun Alaikum, they were suddenly exposed as hypocrites, and they will suffer in hell forever. I hope we can see the problem with this logic, right? Obviously, this is not the case. Context is king. So, what is this verse all about? It's about those who specifically conspired to commit sin and aggression and defiance of the messenger. And when they went up to the Prophet Muhammad, they greeted him in a way that God never greeted the Prophet with. Now, the question is, what is this greeting? Once again, the Arabic word in question is yuhayyika, which comes from the word tahiyya. And where does God issue for all of us the guidelines and the commands for greetings? Surah 24, verse 61, once again, where God says, Salimu. Initiate, activate, peaceful, surrender. This is the essence of the greeting. Okay? Now, this means that in 58:8, these guys who conspired against the messenger, they did not follow this guideline. They did not greet in a way that is comprised of a peaceful surrender. It's not about salam or assalam. No, it had zero value of peaceful surrender. Okay, obviously these guys conspired to commit sin and aggression against the messenger, so they obviously would not greet the messenger in any peaceful manner. And this is the point. These guys did not follow the guidelines of the Quran, and this is how they were exposed. It is exactly why they said to themselves, why does God not punish us for what we say? It wasn't about Assalamu versus Salamun. It was about no salam at all. Okay, so this is how I understand this particular verse. Nothing to do with Assalam or Salam. It's everything to do with not following the Quranic guidelines of having a peaceful type of greeting. Now, the remainder of the verses that talk about tahiyyat specifically are 4 verses, and they're all about the dwellers of paradise. Let's address each one of them. Let's begin with Surah 10, verse 10, where we read the phrase, وَتَحِيَّتُهُمْ فِيهَا سَلَامٌ, translated as, and their greeting therein is peace. It is salamun. Now, in my first video, in my initial video, I contended that the Arabic word salamun in this particular phrase sounds more like an adjective. Of course, this is based off of my reading of the Arabic language. It sounds more like an adjective. In other words, it's a description of the quality of the greeting. Rather than them saying actually salamun, the salamun is a description of the greeting itself. Okay, that's what I said in that initial video. Now, some people have come back and said, no, grammatically speaking, this is incorrect. And really, I don't have a problem with that because that is not my primary contention. But I do invite these brothers and sisters who are saying this to actually open up an Arabic grammar book where they can see what is the rendition of this particular phrase, and they will see that this idea that I'm talking about is not really foreign at all. Anyway, let's push all of this aside and let us indeed assume that tahiyyatuhum fiha salamun is that literally they were saying peace. Their greeting was salam, salamun. Okay, that was their greeting. Okay, let's assume that. Now, the question still remains. Where in this verse does God issue a command, a requirement for us to say salamun only? It does not exist, again, right? So it's important, again, that we do not extrapolate. It does not exist. God doesn't tell us here that we are required to emulate the dwellers of paradise in order to enter paradise. This is not a prerequisite to entering paradise. God is simply talking about the dwellers of paradise and how they will greet each other. That is all. If you wish to emulate the dwellers of paradise, of course, that is entirely up to you. But understand that God does not require it, nor is it a prerequisite to entering paradise. This would be no different than me quoting the same verse and making the claim that we have to say Alhamdulillahi Rabbil Alameen at the end of our prayers because that is what the dwellers of paradise will be doing. Okay, so as you can see, it's important that we don't try to superimpose notions that are not there. God here does not require us to say Salam or Alhamdulillah Rabbil Alameen in any way. We can do so if we wish, but it's not a requirement. Now, the remainder of the verses are pretty much the same thing. Surah 14, verse 23, it says, Tahiyyatuhum fiha salamun. There's no issued command given by God here that we are required to say this word. Their greeting therein will be peace. Surah 25, verse 75, وَيَلَقَّوْنَ فِيهَا تَحِيَّةً وَسَلَامًا. And they will receive therein greetings and peace. So here we see that they are actually two separate things, greetings and peace. Again, no commands are given here. And then we go to Surah 33, verse 44, تَحِيَّتَهُمْ يَوْمَ يَلْقَوْنَهُ سَلَامٌ. Their greeting on the day they meet him is salamun, peace. So as you can see, none of these verses about the dwellers of paradise is giving us a command to do this or say this. Okay, so once again, let's not superimpose notions that are not there. If we are talking about greetings and the Quranic guidelines of greetings, once again, Surah 24, verse 61 and Surah 4, verse 86 give us clear commands as far as greetings are concerned. So now that we have addressed all the verses that talk specifically about the tahiyyat, and we have seen that God did not limit nor confine the greetings, let's address another couple of verses which they claim God here is limiting and confining the greetings. Let's start with Surah 6, verse 54, which is the most often quoted by them to support the claim that God is limiting and confining the greeting. Surah 6, verse 54 is the primary verse they use to justify the idea that God has limited and confined the greeting to just Salamun Alaikum. This is because this verse reads, "When those who believe in our revelations come to you, say, peace be upon you, you shall say, Salamun Alaikum." Now the first claim regarding this verse is that God here is commanding us to say Salamun Alaikum. And I've read a title that reads, say what you are told to say, Surah 6, verse 54. Say what you are told to say, Surah 6, verse 54. But what is the problem with this claim? The problem is that it's not truly representing what this Quranic verse is actually saying. You see, this verse is not telling us to say anything. This verse is actually a directive to the Prophet Muhammad, as indicated by the word you and say are in a singular form. So God here is actually addressing the Prophet Muhammad. God is not telling us to say anything, technically speaking. And God wanted the Prophet to say this entire statement highlighted here in specific situations and circumstances. So to begin with, this entire claim in of itself is erroneous for the very fact that God here is not commanding us to say anything. Of course, the natural reaction to this is that, don't we want to emulate the Prophet? The Prophet Muhammad, according to this verse, he greeted the people with Salamun Alaikum. Shouldn't we be greeting the people exactly the same way? And the answer is no. As far as greetings are concerned, God already provided us a general guideline. This verse is a directive to the Prophet Muhammad. We should not confuse verses which are directives to the Prophet Muhammad as applications to us. After all, this would be actually quite catastrophic to think that when God tells a prophet to say something And that means we too are required to say that. For example, in Surah 6 verse 19, God tells the Prophet to say, أُوحِيَ إِلَيَّ هَذَا الْقُرْآنِ. This Qur'an has been inspired to me. Obviously, this does not apply to us, and it would be wrong and a lie if we say that. So there is a reason why there are Quranic verses that are directives to the Prophet and Quranic verses that are directives to us. Let's take another example from the Quran. Surah 29 verse 46. It says, وَلَا تُجَادِلُوا أَهْلَ الْكِتَابِ. Here God is speaking in the plural form. He is addressing all the believers. Do not argue with the people of the scripture. And then it says, وَقُولُوا, and you shall all say. قُولُوا, plural. This obviously applies to all of us. And then in the next set of verses, there is a shift to the Prophet Muhammad only. We have revealed to you, Muhammad, the scripture. You did not read any scripture before this, nor did you write it down with your right hand, the Prophet Muhammad. Then in verse 50, and they said, if only a miracle from his Lord was sent down to him, say, Muhammad, say, singular. Miracles are only with God. I am only a clear warner. This obviously is a directive to the Prophet Muhammad. It is not to us. So it's important that we make that clear distinction, brothers and sisters. We should not confuse Quranic verses that God tells a prophet to say or do something and confuse them as us requiring to say it. Otherwise, we are going to end up just like the traditional Muslims. So now that we understand that Surah 6 verse 54 is actually a directive to the Prophet Muhammad specifically, the question still remains. Is it wrong to say Salamun Alaikum just like how the Prophet was required to say it in that case? And the answer is, of course, not. If you wish to emulate the Prophet in this respect, absolutely. However, once again, this does not mean that God has limited nor confined the greeting. We cannot disregard the clear Quranic verses that already gave us the guidelines and the general commands regarding the greeting, Surah 24 verse 61 as an example. So yes, absolutely, if you wish to emulate the Prophet, say Salamun Alaikum. This is what he was required to say it in that time, in that situation. But also remember that if you wish to assert that you are going to emulate the Prophet, then you must understand that the Prophet didn't just say Salamun Alaikum in this case. He said this entire statement. So if you wish to emulate the Prophet, it behooves those who make this claim to actually follow through and actually repeat what the Prophet had said in this case. Now, with that being said, I asserted in my first video that the phrase Salamun Alaikum that the Prophet was required to say here is actually not a greeting. It is actually a statement. The Prophet was literally saying, peace is upon you. And this is evidenced by the fact that the Prophet was required to say this entire statement here, which indicates that Salamun Alaikum was not the Prophet greeting them, saying hello to them, but that literally peace is upon them. Now, some people have come back and said, no, Salamun Alaikum here is actually a greeting, then it was followed by the statement. Okay, now I personally don't have a problem with that, and they are entitled to that opinion. This is obviously becoming more subjective, which is fine. But the point still stands, brothers and sisters. If you wish to emulate the Prophet, if you wish to say what you are told to say as asserted, then it behooves those who are making this claim to actually follow through and repeat and say the same thing that the Prophet said, which is this entire statement. Now, the most interesting part about this is actually they quoted the next verse, verse 55, which reads, "Thus we explain the revelations and expose the path of the unrighteous." The claim made regarding this verse is that God here is talking about those who say anything besides Salamun Alaikum as noted in the previous verse. So if you said, for example, Assalamu Alaikum, you are being exposed as a path of the unrighteous. This is the claim they are making. Now, to me, this is a severe decontextualization of the Quran. You see, this verse has nothing to do with the greeting. Okay? It has nothing to do with whether it's salam or assalam. No. We need to contextualize everything. So, I invite everybody to read 1-2 pages before this particular verse to understand the context. Very briefly, the context is all about people approaching the Prophet Muhammad, some believing, some disbelieving, some on the fence regarding the Quranic revelations that are being recited to them. Let's take some examples. Verse 48, we sent messengers only as bearers of good news and as warners. Those who believe and reform have nothing to fear, nor shall they grieve. God here is talking about those who believe and reform. Then in the next verse, but as for those who reject our revelations, torment will afflict them because of their defiance. Then God tells the Prophet, the Prophet specifically, and warn with it, the Quran, those who fear to be gathered before their Lord. Then God tells the Prophet also, and do not drive away those who call upon their Lord, morning and evening seeking his attention. You see, so God here is addressing the Prophet Muhammad, where there are groups of people coming to him, some believing, some disbelieving, some are on the fence, and so forth. Then we come to the verse that's actually in question. And when those who believe in our revelations come to you, Muhammad, say to them, peace is upon you, literally. Peace is upon them. Why? Because out of all the people that were there, these are the guys who actually chose to believe in the Quranic revelations. Peace is upon you. Why? Your Lord has prescribed mercy for himself, that whoever among you does wrong out of ignorance, then repents afterwards and reforms, he is forgiving, merciful. So the Prophet here is clearly making a statement to these people. He's not telling them hello. He's saying peace is literally upon you because they chose to believe in the Quranic revelations. And then in the next verse, thus we explain the revelations and expose the path of the unrighteous. As you can see, nothing to do with the greeting as they claim, which is not even a greeting. Salaam and Alaikum, peace is upon you. God here is clearly teaching us how he is exposing those who believe versus those who are not believing. Nothing to do with a so-called greeting as used in this passage. The last verse I would like to address is Surah 4 verse 94, which reads, O you who believe, when you journey in the way of God, investigate, and do not say to him who offers you peace, you are not a believer. Now, I don't know if the problem with those who quoted this verse, the problem was with the translation they were using, but the claim that they made is that these people who approached the believers said Assalam as used in this verse. So the claim is that these people approaching the believers said Assalam. This particular claim is wrong. The interpretation of this verse is wrong. You see, the Arabic does not teach us that these people said As-salama. That is not what the verse says, brothers and sisters. The phrase that's actually in question is Alqa ilaykum as-salama, which literally means toss onto you the peace. Okay? Tossed onto you the peace, which is accurately translated as offers you peace in this particular translation. So they have tossed onto you the peace. That has nothing to do with them literally saying as-salama. It wouldn't even make sense in Arabic to just walk up to someone and say as-salama. So alqa ilaykum as-salama means just that, to toss onto you the peace, which can be it's basically a peace offering. It can be in any format. Obviously a peaceful greeting, a gift, a white flag, whatever it may be, it's a peaceful offering. And whatever it is, they did not literally say as-salama, which simply does not make sense in the Arabic language. So hopefully we have addressed sufficient amount of verses in the Quran, the bulk of the verses in the Quran regarding the concept of greetings and the verses that they claim to talk about greetings. And we have seen that God did not limit nor confine the greeting whatsoever. Let's now address the linguistic aspect of the word salam. You see, they said that they did not have a problem with the word salam, salamun, salaman as these are used in the Quran. They had a problem with adding that definite article al to the term salam, which makes it the peace rather than just peace. And then they claimed, or they asked, where did you get Assalamu from? Where did this come from? And then they claimed that Assalamu Alaikum is actually derived from the Hadith literature. So there are several problems with this claim. First of all, what is the difference between Salam and Assalam? When we add a definite article in the Arabic language to a term, it makes it specific. If we said, for example, Kitab, book, versus Al-Kitab, the book, one is general, the other is specific. But nonetheless, the subject is still the same, book. So likewise, Salam and Assalam, peace and the peace, the subject is still the same. We are still conveying peace. And this again is in concordance with the Quranic law, where God says, Sallimu, Surah 24, verse 61, Sallimu, initiate, activate, peaceful surrender. So in whatever way you convey that peace, you are still in concordance with the Quranic law. Salam, Assalam. Does not matter as long as you're conveying that greeting of peace. So from a linguistic aspect, no, there is no difference. You're still in alignment with the Quranic law. Now then they asked, where did you get Assalamu from? Once again, it does not need to be in the Quran. If I said, Salamullahi Alaikum, the peace of God unto you, this is perfectly in alignment with the Quranic law. It does not need to be in the Quran, okay? Because the Quran already gave us the general guideline. But let's go by this argument that we need to find the greeting Assalamu in the Quran. Well, once again, Surah 19 verse 33, Prophet Jesus said, Wassalamu alayya. Here a prophet of God said, Wassalamu alayya. Whether we're taking this as a greeting or a mere statement to himself is not the point. The point, it is found in the Quran, which means it's perfectly a valid Arabic term. Okay, so the bottom line is that it is found in the Quran, but even if it's not, it's still in concordance with the Quranic law. Now then there's this claim that Assalamu Alaikum is taken from the Hadith literature. Now my response to this is that since we are all Quran alone followers, whether something has or has not something in the Hadith is irrelevant to what we are talking about when it comes to focusing on and extracting understandings from the Quran alone perspective. After all, I don't know if they know this, but Salamun Alaikum is also found in the Hadiths. Okay, we can actually go to a Hadith here and see Salamun Alaikum right over here is used in the Hadiths. But this should never be a point of contention. It does not matter if it's in the Hadith or not. Once again, the Quran is crystal clear as far as guidelines when it comes to the Quran, when it comes to greetings. God gave us a general guideline, and that is all that we need to know. So as we have seen, brothers and sisters, according to the Quran, when it comes to the topic of greetings, God simply gave us a general guideline for greetings. As long as we sallimu, initiate, activate, peaceful surrender, this is what truly matters. This is a greeting from God that is blessed and good. Now, before I leave you guys, something did come to my mind when I was making this video response. Do you guys say Insha'Allah? Because if you do, I know I say Insha'Allah. If you do, then we are actually violating the Quran. Because according to 1824, the Prophet Muhammad was required to say Illa an yasha Allah and not Insha'Allah. He said Illa an yasha Allah. Okay, not Insha'Allah. Of course, I'm being absolutely facetious, but I can give you an example from the Quran here, how easy it is to superimpose notions that are not there. Of course, Insha'Allah is used elsewhere in the Quran, but here the God told the Prophet to say, Illa an yasha Allah. So hopefully my point came across clear, and I pray that you guys are doing well. And of course, Illa an yasha Allah. I'll see you in the next video.